Who doesn't know London? Who hasn't seen, at least in films, the red double-decker buses, the old black cabs, or the typical red telephone booths of London? Who doesn't associate the Queen's Guards in their characteristic red uniforms and bearskin hats with London? Who hasn't read the tales of Sherlock Holmes, and who hasn't seen a British crime program where the investigators of Scotland Yard had the lead role? Who couldn't list the famous sights? The Tower, Big Ben, the Houses of Parliament, Trafalgar Square, Westminster, or Saint Paul's Cathedral. Who could forget the blocks of townhouses or the red brick chimneys around which Mary Poppins and Peter Pan flew? Who hasn't heard of the famous pubs with their centuries-old traditions which Shakespeare, Dickens, or Churchill once frequented? Everyone knows London, and the atmosphere is still reliably archaic enough to fulfill all expectations evoked by memories. The largest and perhaps most beautiful green area is Kensington Park and the adjacent Hyde Park. Across from Royal Albert Hall stands the Prince Albert Monument. The group of statues at each of the four corners of the base depict the peoples of Europe, Asia, America, and Africa. Further up, allegoric figures watch over the vaulted pavilion where the gilded statue of Prince Albert sits with the catalogue of the 1851 World Exposition, which was held in London. Hyde Park is approximately 250 hectares and was once the Royal Hunting Game Reserve, but also was the scene of horse races, executions, masquerade balls, and duels. The Serpentine, a man-made lake, is fed by the Thames. It's ideal for fishing, boating, and even swimming. The area around is perfect for active types pursuing sports, as well as for those who want to get away from the hustle and bustle and just enjoy the fresh air and quiet in the center of the city. The marble arch designed by John Nash originally stood as the Triumphal Arch opposite Buckingham Palace. However, it proved to be too small and narrow for the royal carriages and was subsequently moved by Queen Victoria to the site of executions. This is how the beautiful arch of Carr marble became the entranceway to Hyde Park. The character of Sherlock Holmes, the master detective of all time, was created by Arthur Conan Doyle, an English doctor whose failing medical practice left him with a lot of idle time. The detective with ironclad logic was supposedly based on one of his teachers. What Doyle was like as a doctor, we may never find out, but as a writer, he had an exceptional knack for catering to the taste of the public. The master detective reached such a high level of popularity that when his creator, after having featured him in numerous novels and short stories, had become bored with the figure and had him liquidated, the immeasurable public indignation forced him to resurrect him. The popularity of the character is evident in the number of plays, comic books, and films he's been featured in. Newer and newer adaptations are still being created to this day. Few fictional heroes around the world can boast having their own museum. The Sherlock Holmes Museum in London, at the well-known 221B Baker Street address, is one of them. Since Holmes is so characteristically English, it has become an unmissable place to go on the tourist checklist. While the museum recreates the atmosphere of the Victorian era with period articles and wax figures of notable people of the time, the museum gift shop is a prime example of 21st century marketing. Madame Tussaud's Wax Museum is another typically London sight. The French woman lived in the court of Louis XVI and prepared wax figures of all the famous people beheaded in the French Revolution. The figures were first exhibited in London in 1835. The collection is constantly expanding with life-size wax statues of politicians, artists, and celebrities who often donate their own clothes for their lifeless doubles to don. In spite of its name, the British Museum, established in 1753, exhibits much more than merely British objects. This was the world's first truly public national museum. Amazingly enough, there's still no admission charge. The museum was originally opened in the mansion of an aristocrat, which quickly proved too small. Built in 1823, the tympanic columned palace is under constant expansion. For the new millennium, the courtyard was marbled and topped with a glass ceiling. In the center of the court, under the dome, is the circular library. Alongside the classics, one can also find such popular works as the first edition of Scarlet Pimpernel, the stories of Beatrix Potter, or the manuscripts of Conan Doyle. Among the numerous exceptional treasures on exhibit at the British Museum, perhaps the ancient Egyptian collection is the most valuable. From the mummified sacred cat to the beard of the great Sphinx of Giza to the Tibesian granite statue of Ramesses II, there's a wealth of objects to see. The most famous is the Rosetta Stone, which dates back to 196 BC and was found in the Nile Valley in 1799. The text of a decree was inscribed on it in hieroglyphic symbols, Demotic writing, and in Greek translation. By comparing these three variations of the inscription, the French archaeologist Champollion was finally able to decipher the secret of the hieroglyphics. Understanding the writing on the Rosetta Stone is considered a milestone in Egyptology. There's also a significant ancient Greek collection with, for example, Elgin marble from the Parthenon. The shell and gold inlaid ram in the bush is from the ancient Sumerian city of Ur. The Portlandian vase is from an ancient Roman grave dating back to the 1st century. The Amitabha Buddha comes from China. Also worth mentioning is the Aztec mosaic mask depicting Quetzalcoatl and the Mildenhall treasure, which is perhaps the most valuable of any of the ancient artifacts found in England. Oxford Street and vicinity is one of the busiest shopping districts in the world. The semicircular section of Regent Street between Oxford Circus and Piccadilly Circus is called the Quadrant. Numerous large department stores and famous shops line the street. For instance, there's the world's largest toy store, Hamleys. But also worth mentioning are Marks & Spencer, House of Fraser, and then there's Selfridges, one of the largest British department stores, second only to Harrods. Just a few steps from here, we find ourselves on Seville Row, where tailors busily prepare the world's most elegant suits. The easiest way to get around the 1,625 kilometers of London is the Underground, or Tube as it is popularly termed. The 11 lines are denoted by different colors. With a total of 271 stops, you can get just about anywhere in no time. The most common meeting place in London is the statue of Eros in Piccadilly Square. The statue and fountains were designed by Alfred Gilbert in honor of the great humanitarian Lord Shaftesbury. A street nearby also bears his name. The neon advertisements, which have been illuminating the square since 1910, add to the vibrancy of Piccadilly. The subground level Criterion Theatre was originally the music gallery of the extravagant restaurant bearing the same name. The value of the richly gilded ornamentation is said to amount to more than £1 million. Opposite, we see the famous 19th century concert hall, the London Pavilion, which has been enveloped by the Trocadero building. Behind the original facade lies an ultra-modern shopping center, complete with eateries and places of entertainment. Trafalgar Square is named after the famous sea battle. Atop the 44-meter column stands the statue of Admiral Nelson, who prevented Napoleon's fleet from coming ashore in England. The statues of many military commanders on Trafalgar Square seem insignificant compared to the 4 giant lion statues. The lions, however, are tame and peacefully tolerate children playing on them, as well as the snapshots of tourists. The square is also the geographic center of London and serves as the 0-kilometer point from which distances from the city are measured. Just as on St. Mark's Square in Venice, here too, people feed the urban pigeons. The spray from the fountains is especially refreshing in the summer heat, but the place is just as full of atmosphere under a blanket of snow in the winter months, when Christmas and New Year's celebrations are held here. Daniel Defoe, the author of Robinson Crusoe, was once set in a pillory here for a polemic essay he wrote on religion. The National Gallery occupies the entire northern side of the square. Since the mid-19th century, the impressive building with its dome and Corinthian columns has given home to one of the largest fine arts collections in the world. Pall Mall is the street of those famous London clubs. Remember Jules Verne's famous hero Phileas Fogg, who bet that he could travel around the world in 80 days? Well, the wager was placed at the famous Reform Club, which still operates on Pall Mall today. The others nearby include the Athenaeum Club, the Royal Automobile Club, the Travellers Club, the Turf Club, the Army and Navy Club, and the Oxbridge Club for the alumni of Oxford and Cambridge universities. Those who can only think of the beef dish when they hear the name Wellington had better visit the Wellington Museum in the Aspley House. The Triumphal Arch, also in honor of the Iron Duke, has stood on the square opposite since 1828. Atop the modestly proportioned Greek arch stands the chariot of the Goddess of Victory. Since World War I, the square has also been the site of the Royal Artillery Memorial. Unfortunately, the naturalist yet dignified composition has had to be expanded to include the casualties of newer wars. Ever wonder why the British are such staunch believers in parliamentary democracy? Because they've been practicing it since 1264. The Neo-Gothic Parliament building, also referred to as Westminster Palace, spans an area of more than 3 hectares and for 287 meters along the bank of the Thames. The impressive building boasts 11 courtyards, 100 stairwells, and 1,100 offices. Construction of the complex began in 1840 and incorporated the old Westminster Hall and the remains of St. Stephen Chapel, including the crypt. The old palace endured a number of fires and was devastated by World War II. The latest restoration work on the building, designed by Charles Barry, revealed some of the marvelous details and the original golden yellow color of the sandstone used. Houses of Parliament. The plural is used as the British Parliament is comprised of a lower and an upper house, the House of Commons and the House of Lords, respectively. Their sessions are open to the public and tourists. Of the three towers of the building, Victoria Tower is the tallest at 120 meters, and Big Ben is the most famous. And now we must clear up a persistent, widely held misunderstanding. For Big Ben is not the name of the clock tower, nor the name of the clock in it. It's the name of the bell in the tower, weighing all of 1.5 quintals and named after Sir Benjamin Hall. Westminster Abbey was the coronation and burial place of most English rulers. The Parliament building and the Abbey developed and changed with the passing of time and the accumulation of historic events. Turbulent times brought newer and newer rulers who had newer and newer visions, employing their own architects. Legend has it that the church was dedicated in 616 by Mellitus, the first bishop of London. However, there's no evidence to support this fact. The coronation seat, carved around 1300, and the stone of Scone, a symbol of Scottish independence, are kept here. Apart from royal tombs, writers and poets also rest here. The immortal author of the Canterbury Tales, Geoffrey Chaucer, as well as Browning, Tennyson, T.S. Eliot, and Lord Byron, to name a few. The Church of St. Margaret seems minute compared to the Abbey, but its significance is no less. It was founded in 1189. Milton had his wedding here, as did Churchill hundreds of years later. Haller, the famous Czech bronze engraver, is also buried here. It's thanks to him that we can see pictures of what London looked like before the Great Fire. The Cabinet Room, from where Churchill directed the country during World War II, is now open to the public. Whitehall, built originally as a baronial palace, later becoming a royal palace, is now the seat of government. Part of the building is the famous 10 Downing Street, serving not only as the residence of the British Prime Minister, but also the garrison of the Royal Mounted Guards as well. The residence of Her Majesty the Queen, Buckingham Palace, rises high above St. James Park and the greens of the Royal Gardens. The name comes from the prince who built it in 1703. His family sold it to George III some 60 years later. However, it was Queen Victoria who truly transformed it into the royal palace it is today. Perhaps this is why the white marble statue of her stands in the circle outside the palace. As we saw in the Prince Albert Memorial, this too is made of white marble and bronze, with gilded allegorical figures which surround the main figure. From atop the base of the statue, we get a perfect view of the changing of the guards and other events in the royal courtyard. Buckingham Palace opened its gates to the public in 1993. However, all this means is that in the early autumn, when the royal family goes on vacation, visitors can enter the palace for a period of a few weeks. Not everyone is lucky enough to be in London at precisely this time. As consolation, they can witness the impressive changing of the guards ceremony, which takes place daily in the months from spring to fall and every 2 days in the months from fall to spring. The weekend changing of the guards is more spectacular. The guards arrive from the Wellington garrison nearby, while the garrison of the mounted guards is on the other side of the mall in the building adjacent to the White Hall. So they ride their horses in front of the memorial column of the Duke of York, who was Commander-in-Chief of the British Army for over 30 years. The Thames originates from the Cotswold Hills in Gloucestershire and after 370 winding kilometres flows into the North Sea at Sheerness. The City of London was built on both banks 64 kilometres from the mouth of the river. A bus tour of the city also includes a boat trip as a bonus. The boats leave from Charing Cross, cruise past the Parliament Building up to the Tower Bridge, where they turn around. One of the new sites of the city was built in honor of the millennium. Its present on the skyline is just as difficult to get used to as the Eiffel Tower must have been in Paris at the time of its erection. It is, of course, British Airways London Eye, the largest Ferris wheel in the world, an impressive modern construction in its own right. It stands right next to the neo-Renaissance building of County Hall on the bank of the Thames. The ticket office and coffee shop are located in the former County Hall building. As a result of the 1986 urban reorganization, the building is used solely for cultural purposes. An exhibit hall and aquarium operate in it currently. The 135-meter-high giant wheel carries 30 air-conditioned glass capsules of a capacity of 25 persons each into the air. One trip, including boarding and disembarking, takes half an hour. Go up in the morning to enjoy the best light conditions. On clear days, you can see for up to 40 kilometers. A magnificent aerial view of Big Ben, the Parliament, Buckingham Palace, ships on the Thames, and the famous bridges that span it open up from within the capsule. Outside the historic city centre, the modern glass skyscrapers are also visible. Be sure to take binoculars and a camera on this exciting trip. Tribute is paid to Sherlock Holmes even outside the museum on Baker Street. In the pub by the same name, one can reminisce about the novels of Conan Doyle while nursing a pint of Guinness. From here, it's only a few meters to the new pedestrian bridge leading to the London Eye. It was built alongside the old Charing Cross Railway Bridge. The oldest monument in London was built in about 1450 BC, Cleopatra's Needle, an obelisk from Heliopolis, Egypt. It was a gift from the Egyptian Governor-General and was erected on the bank of the Thames in 1878. The bronze sphinxes were also sculpted at this time and harmonized well with the nearby statue of the heraldic animal of London. The bridges spanning the Thames were made immortal in numerous literary and film works. For instance, Waterloo Bridge is featured in the 1940 film classic starring Robert Taylor and Vivien Leigh. while London Bridge was prominent in the historic detective story by John Dickson Carr. Bankside is the part of the city along the Thames where the famous theatres of the Middle Ages are located: the Cockpit, the Swan, the Hope, the Rose, and of course Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. The first Globe Theatre, made of wood, was consumed by flames in 1613. Its successor was shut down in 1644. It's based on this successor that the current Circular Theatre was constructed of period materials and opened its doors in 1995. The museum gives a glimpse of what theatre life was like in the 18th century through models, sketches, and engravings. It also familiarizes us with the lives of Shakespeare and his contemporaries, Ben Jonson and Marlowe. The king of drama writers was born in 1564 and buried 52 years later, 200 kilometers from London in Stratford-upon-Avon. It was in London that he achieved fame. In his hometown, his plays weren't played until after his death. From the balconies of the theatre, we can gaze out at the Thames and the ships passing by. Pickford's Wharf is a classic example of how abandoned docks, warehouses, and small factories in disuse can be transformed to accommodate the needs of local residents and visitors. Many of these old buildings now serve cultural and touristic purposes. Following considerable restoration work, the old sailing ship, the Golden Hinde from 1577, is now on display at the dock by the Tea House Terrace. It was on board this ship that Sir Francis Drake was granted knighthood by Queen Elizabeth I. The ship is not only open to tourists, but is also used as a venue for various private functions. Southwark Cathedral at the foot of London Bridge can barely be picked out from among the scramble of the market and the buildings dating back to the Middle Ages. The history of the church is little more than a chronicle of destruction by fire and the ensuing restoration work, and all this starting as far back as the time of the Normans. The docks were for a very long time a perilous and shady area of London. The horrific detective stories of Edgar Wallace often took place here, and it is by no accident that the city walk by the name of Jack the Ripper's Sinister London Tour also starts out from the docks. The role of Britain in the two world wars can be seen in the permanent exhibition Britain at War at the foot of the bridge. The area is also brimming with many old classic pubs to choose from. The rebirth of the docks shows the metamorphosis that old buildings can go through, as well as the opportunities afforded by modern architecture. A good example of this transformation is the spectacular Hayes Gallery building. On the banks opposite, the many towers of the tower are already visible. On the other side of the bridge, many sights await us, such as the Great Fire Memorial and the Museum of London, where we can take a trip back in time through the past of the city in computer-controlled cars. The tower is a piece of history in the present, surrounded by a wall. It has served as the residence of kings, as a fortress, a prison, an arsenal, as a mint, and even as a zoo. Today it functions as a museum and treasury. The royal crown jewels are guarded here. The first king to take residence here was William the Conqueror, the last James I. As prisoners, such illustrious guests enjoyed the hospitality of the Tower as the Bishop of Durham, Henry VI, Thomas Morris, and the wives of Henry VIII. The last prisoner to live here was Rudolf Hess during World War II. The tower was built directly on the bank of the Thames. The concentric walls are more or less pentagonal in shape and partially include the ancient Roman city wall from the times of Julius Caesar. The entrance to the building complex is through the middle tower. The towers of the interior wall system each have very revealing names: Bloody Tower, Flint Tower, Broad Arrow Tower, and Governor Tower. The history of the tower is entwined with the long and exciting history of London and England, from the conquest of the Romans through the Norman invasions to the War of the Roses. There are two significant buildings within the fort walls: the White Tower, which served as the residence of kings, and the garrison, which now serves as the Royal Treasury. According to legend, if the black ravens who live here leave the tower, it means the fall of the British Empire. The lively presentations by tour guides in period costumes help us understand the events of the past.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Her Majesty's Palace, Fortress, the Tower of London. I am dressed in the clothes of a man who has just returned from hunting in the 13th century. I suppose the heyday of the Tower of London.
There are, of course, those who do not don their uniforms as mere costumes. We're familiar with these beefeaters from the labels of gin bottles. They're the select few who make up the elite guardsman unit of Her Majesty, officially known as Yeoman Wardens. The beefeaters and the guards keep a watchful eye over the royal treasury where the royal jewels are kept. The collection includes St. Edward's and Queen Victoria's crown, as well as the state sword, the royal orb, and the world's largest diamond, the 530-carat Star of Africa, which is encased in the royal scepter. The crown of Queen Elizabeth, the imperial state crown, was made for her father in 1937 and is adorned with 2,868 diamonds, 17 sapphires, 11 emeralds, and 5 rubies. Looking down from Tower Bridge, we can see that the White Tower is actually rhombus-shaped and that its 4 towerets are different from each other. The Norman friar Gundulf built the tower on orders of King William on the ruins of the small fort of the Saxon king Alfred. The walls of the White Tower are 4 meters thick, but this stockiness is optically masked by the white stone inlays found at the corner edges of the tower. Many a ruler made an appearance here, some willingly, some less so. Some departed from here to their coronation ceremony, some to their own executions. One such execution scaffold is still visible today, and the museum displays the block and hatchet used for decapitations. The weapons exhibit also displays the armor of kings, as well as life-sized models of their horses. King Richard III, who Shakespeare later portrayed as the wretched-souled main character in one of his famous works, had his 2 nephews killed in the Bloody Tower. The remains of the 2 little princes were found 2 centuries later and laid to rest in Westminster Abbey. The museum and exhibits set up in the towers and buildings of the tower are not at all like those where historic items are encased in glass showcases away from dust and curious hands. Like most museums in London, here too, the collection comes alive with hands-on, interactive, and informative exhibits that challenge the mind. In front of the building complex known as the Queen's House, just as in front of Buckingham Palace, bearskin-hatted sentries are on duty, though the changing of the guards here at the house is less spectacular than the one at the palace. Permission for the building of Tower Bridge was only granted on condition that the construction blended well with the buildings of the tower. The architects met this requirement so skillfully that the bridge, which was finished in 1894 and has since become the symbol of London, is thought by many to be older than it really is. The bridge has Gothic towers and gates reminiscent of the architectural style of the Middle Ages, when houses and churches were also built on the bridges. Sirs Horace Jones and John Wolfe were the masterminds of the 244-meter bridge. There are 2 bascules weighing 1,000 tons each, allowing for the passage of larger seafaring vessels. The drawing of the bascules is signaled by the ringing of bells. At such times, only motor vehicle traffic comes to a halt. Pedestrians can continue across uninterruptedly on the Tower Bridge Walkway, a grid footbridge suspended high between the towers. Elevators take pedestrians to and from the walkway, where multimedia presentations familiarize pedestrians with the history and architecture of the bridge. But the mere view is also well worth the walk. After you've had your fill of the view, it's worth taking a look at the no longer used steam-powered engine room. The machines fell into disuse in 1975 when they switched to electric power. It seems the machines weren't the only things to be left here. So were the furnace men. Waterloo Station is the busiest train station in London with a volume of 2,000 trains per day. The international trains heading under the English Channel also depart from here, as do those to closer destinations, such as to Hampton Court Castle. Hampton Court belongs to Greater London, as it is merely 20 kilometers from the city centre. The floral station is separated from the entrance to the palace gardens by a bridge. People rowing in boats on the river bring to mind the classic jovial novel by Jerome, which takes place on the Thames, called 3 Men in a Boat. Cardinal Thomas Wolsey rented the area from the Knights Hospitaller. In 1514, he ordered the beginning of work on the palace with the unconcealed and immodest aim that it become the most ornamental and beautiful palace of its time. The cardinal must have been an astute diplomat, as he served King Henry VIII for nearly 2 decades, but in 1528 he fell in disfavor with the king. He subsequently voluntarily offered up the palace to the king to make amends. However, this proved to be insufficient, for the king had already set his sights on the building. Wolsey was arrested, and while being escorted to London, died under mysterious circumstances. Henry continued construction and expansion on the palace, which he bestowed on each of his successive wives. The main gate opens to the red brick facade. A beautiful bridge adorned with heraldic animals stretches across the moat to the gate. The Anne Boleyn Gate leads to the first and largest Tudor-style courtyard, which belongs to the original building. The largest space in the royal suite is the 50-meter-long Great Hall. The walls of the Gothic-style chambers are covered with hunting trophies, paintings, and Gobelin tapestries. An English castle of any repute cannot be without its share of ghosts. It's said that the ghost of Catherine Howard, a beheaded wife of Henry VIII, comes back to haunt the castle. No doubt, Thomas Wolsey would also have every right to do the same. The royal suite of the Queen is the work of Christopher Wren, who also died here in 1723. The walls and ceiling of the central royal staircase are adorned with the astounding frescoes of Verrio. The Tudor-style kitchen dates back to the time of Henry VIII. It's set up to reflect the times with meticulous detail. Even the fire is kept burning in the stove. We can get a glimpse of how the servants prepared for a typical royal feast, perhaps following a successful hunt. If requested, a guide in period costume will escort us through the castle relating the history of the building. All this is included in the price. Let's also add that Hampton Court, along with just about every site in London, has its own website on the internet. This may make planning your trip a lot easier. Such a beautiful Versailles-like palace requires a similarly beautiful palace grounds. The Hampton Court Gardens are so beautiful that the largest and most popular gardening and botanical show and fair is organized here each year, which draws huge crowds to the grounds. The countless neglected riverside docks of Hampstead have given way to modern glass skyscrapers. Many thousands of people work in the numerous office buildings. Hampstead gains its significance from housing huge shopping centers and being a node for transportation. For instance, we must transfer here on our way from London to Greenwich. Greenwich is merely 7.5 kilometers from the center of London and is also accessible by ship. At one time, it was a fishing village, and the surrounding hills served as royal hunting grounds. The splendid buildings were built primarily on ruins at about the time of Henry VIII. Greenwich has long been a favorite place to visit for Londoners. Tourists usually come to the area to visit the Cutty Sark and the observatory. Only upon arrival do they realize how much more there is to see and do. Clipper ships are among the most beautiful sailing vessels, and the Cutty Sark is the most beautiful clipper. It was built in 1869 at a time when steamships were beginning to replace sailing ships. This was one of the last such ships to transport tea from China to England. The ship's name comes from the poem Tam O'Shanter by Robert Burns. Her cuddy sark, O Paisley Harn, that while a lassie she had worn, in longitude though sorely scanty, it was her best, and she was vaunty. Cuddy sark is the Scottish term for the short shirt the witch named Nanny wears. Nanny Witch is the figurehead on the bow of the ship. John Willis, who built the ship, was Scottish, as was the poet. The ship has been standing in dry dock as a tourist attraction for nearly 50 years. On prominent display are the original furnishings of the cabins, pictures of the tea trade, but perhaps the most interesting is the unique figurehead collection of an eccentric local merchant. Among them are Cleopatra, Florence Nightingale, and U.S. President Lincoln. It's odd that some figureheads depict men, for the ladies were more common figureheads. In fact, the crew didn't generally tolerate any other women on board, as it was considered to bring bad luck. Perhaps this is why Francis Chichester embarked on circumnavigating the world alone? Answers to these and other questions can be found in his autobiography entitled The Lonely Sea and the Sky. His ship, the Gypsy Moth 4, stands here next to the Cuddy Sark, in honor of the record he established. Queen Elizabeth dubbed both the pilot and the captain of the ship lords with the same sword that Elizabeth I presented as a gift to Sir Francis Drake. The illustrious event took place at the Royal Naval College, but a few hundred meters from here. The buildings, which were originally built as hospitals, are also the work of Sir Christopher Wren. The remains of the 15th century palace where Henry VII and his two daughters Mary and Margaret were born were excavated in the courtyard of the Naval College. The church bearing the name of St. Alphege was built where the Archbishop of Canterbury was killed by the Danes. The famous Painted Hall is a naval officer's dining hall, but don't expect the puritanical plainness characteristic of the military. Sir James Thornhill worked for 2 years on the spectacular interior. The frescoes depict the 4 primary virtues: loyalty, hope, mercifulness, and humility. Nelson was laid out in state here following the Battle of Trafalgar. Seaman's Chapel stands opposite. A wretched little house nearby is the place where the famous writer Edgar Wallace was born. Admiral Sir George Seymour is laid to rest in the entrance hall of the church. Where on earth could you find the most impressive Maritime Museum, if not here? England was for a considerable time a naval superpower and gave many an explorer and traveler to the world. There's Captain Cook and the leader of the North Pole expedition, Scott. Scott's ship, the Discovery, was a museum ship on the Thames in London, but following full restoration, it was put on display in Dundee, Scotland, where it was originally built. Behind the museum is a gently sloping green hill where Londoners love to walk, play, kick back, and relax. At the top of the hill is the Greenwich Royal Observatory. The observatory is significant for 2 reasons. This is where the world's prime meridian, or 0-degree longitude, runs, and the clock of the institution is the standard to which the time zones around the world are adjusted. Many frequent the place just to see the exhibit. The dome of Saint Paul's Cathedral is well visible from here, and the tower is barely 10 kilometers away. Others come to visit the museum, to see Flamsteed's, the first astronomer's objects, and the chronometer of Harrison, which Captain Cook also used. Thousands of tourists come to the observatory to have their picture taken straddling the prime meridian with one foot in the east and one in the west. Other must-sees of Greenwich are the Coach and Trafalgar Tavern. The pub's interior is designed like a ship and was the regular haunt of Dickens and Thackeray at the time. An antique and flea market is held daily with antiques, folk art, and handicrafts for sale. As they say, if it isn't on sale here, it doesn't exist. Getting back to the heart of London, let's take a closer look at St. Paul's Cathedral. The dome is the second largest in the world after the dome of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. At one time, a shrine to the goddess Diana stood here, followed by a medieval church which burned down in the Great Fire of 1688. The stones of the church ruins were carried off by Lord Somerset for the building of his own palace. Shortly thereafter, he paid for them in the tower with his head. The collapsed crypts were turned into workshops, and the undercroft functioned as a wine cellar. At one point, even a theater operated among the ruins. Sir Christopher Wren was entrusted with designing the new building. He began the building of the new church in 1675, which continued until 1710. The colossal building is strikingly similar to the Basilica in Rome. Corinthian columns stand at the top of the entrance steps, and double columns support tympanum on the elevated facade. The dome between the two towers is only visible from a distance. Upon entering, we see just how monumental the basilica is. Like Westminster Abbey, this too is a national shrine, the final resting place of numerous artists and military leaders, among them Nelson and Wellington. There are memorials for Lawrence of Arabia, the inventor of penicillin, Fleming, as well as the creator of the space itself, Christopher Wren, who died at the ripe age of 91. In the 19th century, the cathedral was the site of the perfect crime, the circumstances of which still remain a mystery to this day. The treasury of the St. Paul's, which requires the unlocking of 8 doors, was robbed. Only each of the doors was found locked shut and unhampered after the incident. Now there's a case for Sherlock Holmes. Fleet Street is one of the many famous streets in London. It's the headquarters of the British National Press, with countless editorial offices and printing presses. The name comes from Fleet Stream, which spills into the Thames under Blackfriars Bridge. In the great reorganization of the city, the creek was put underground. Editorial offices have without exception all since moved to the new office space on the former docks, and the subsequent hustle, bustle, and excitement of closing time has also vanished. The famous pubs in the area, however, did not go empty, for the High Court of Justice and the legal offices in the area provide a constant stream of clientele in the evening hours. Perhaps the most famous pub is the Tipperary, which was immortalized in song by homesick soldiers in the World War. We're now in the part of London known as the City, the world of lawyers, brokers, and bankers. The London Transport Museum stands at the corner of Covent Gardens. The area once served as cloistergarth to the monks of Westminster Abbey. Then Duke Bedford entrusted the famous architect Inigo Jones to design a new square. Jones favored the Italian style and built the piazza, which later became the site of the market hall and market until 1975. The market has since relocated, but the hustle and bustle remains. The refurbished market hall is now home to unique little shops, coffee houses, and eateries. Today, this is the most colorful and dynamic part of the city. In the summer months, the terraces are filled with people listening to street musicians and theatrical productions. According to the play, Eliza sold flowers here in My Fair Lady. Bordered by Regent Street, Oxford Street, and Charing Cross Road, Soho isn't far from Piccadilly. It was once a popular hunting grounds, after which it became populated by various refugee groups. French came following the collapse of the Parisian Commune, then Italian and Polish Jews, to be followed by those persecuted from Italy and Greece. Immigrant revolutionaries such as Jean-Paul Marat and Karl Marx, artists such as Shelley and Mozart, and such masters of the art of living as Casanova lived here throughout the ages. Galsworthy, the author of the Forsyth Saga, once wrote, "Soho is disorderly, full of shady characters, cats, Italians, tomatoes, restaurants, gaudy things, and curious people who stare out their windows at the street. Soho lives for itself, far from the staunchly regulated British order." Soho has both changed and remained the same. It is still the theater district with countless cinemas, pubs, locales, nightclubs, and other sources of entertainment crowded into one small area. Londoners still wash down the day with a pint in the pubs every night. Should somebody not find room in a pub, then they drink their dose on the street outside. And if there aren't enough chairs, then they sit on beer kegs or cases of beer. And if they still don't have enough seats, then they settle on the sidewalk curb, but the mood is still superb. Some of the regulars look as if they had stepped out of one of the amusing Wodehouse novels. It's no coincidence that a moderately sized but all the more interesting Chinatown has also developed here in the most cosmopolitan part of the city. Soho is a place where all foreigners feel they have experienced the real London.